Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the first ever edition of the Home Run Hitters podcast, part of SportsTimeHQ. I'm one of your co-hosts, Charles Castellanos, along with my knowledgeable co-host, Andrew Quinn. Andrew, how are you?
Chuck, I'm doing well, man. Excited to get things rolling with you tonight.
As am I. We have a action-packed show for you today, folks. We are going to be going over some of the notable moves that have been made so far. Post-MLB lockout, we got some trades to look over, a few little free agent signings here and there. And later on, we're going to do a little bit of a mock draft simulator and give you our thoughts on some fantasy values for ADP draft-wise. So why don't we get started? You got a trade you want to talk about, Andrew?
Yeah, Chuck, let's dive right into this, man. The Twins were busy this weekend. They're definitely the first team to make some big splashes post-lockout. Let's just get into the big one first. They got Sonny Gray today, pitcher who has formerly been with the Reds for the past couple of years. You know, he's getting older, but he still has a ton of gas left in the tank. He's going to be a big add for the Twins, and he should slot right into one of the top spots in their rotation.
Yeah, I did like that move, and especially since the Twins made the decision to trade Jose Barrios to Toronto last year, that kind of left a gaping hole in that rotation. And I think Sonny Gray can fill that in. Maybe not as high-key as, say, someone like Jose Barrios, but he's very capable, and I think he excels on a small market team. He did a great job. He did a great job in Oakland. You know, we saw him struggle a bit in his short stint with the Yankees because I don't think, the Bright Lights in New York were a good fit for him. But once he went to Cincinnati, we saw his value go up a little bit more. He started to perform better. I think the same thing can be the case for Minnesota as well. So I do like that for them.
For sure. And for the Reds, they're not really in a super competitive spot this year, losing a couple guys to free agency and Joey Votto aging, Suarez having some down seasons offensively from a, on-base percentage standpoint. So, for them to at least get rid of Sonny Gray as opposed to paying him a big contract coming up, I think it's a good move for them. They get Chase Petty, who's a good-looking prospect out of Minnesota. And for the Twins, too, they're really bolstering up, also adding Isaiah Kiner-Falefa from the Rangers, who is a great defender, not super productive offensively, but he's going to definitely get a lot of games for the Twins and probably is going to slot into a middle infield spot for them. So they have definitely added some firepower to the team in this weekend.
Absolutely. I guess I'm not as high on the Kiner-Falefa move because I think it hurt to give up a guy like Mitch Garver. I'm a big Mitch Garver believer. He just recently had a 31 home run season. He's got serious pop in his bat. He's a quality defender, and good catchers are hard to come by nowadays in the MLB. But Kiner-Falefa can do a little bit of everything. He can play all over the diamond. He should slot in nicely in one of the I think he probably would play third base because I think Josh Donaldson is at a point in his career where the DH would probably be the best role for him since he's 36 and he's not quite as agile as he used to be.
Yeah, that's very, very true. Well, what other moves did you like from this past weekend? Anyone else kind of jump out at you or surprise you?
Yes, actually, I got to say, the Mets, man. The Mets are making moves.
Did you see they're going to, have a $300 million payroll?
Yeah, Steve Cohen's not afraid to spend the big bucks. Let's just leave it at that.
Well, we know he's not.
We saw what they were doing before the lockout, where they gave Max Scherzer that huge contract. They're paying Eduardo Escobar, Mark Canha, and then even now, post-lockout, they're making trades to help bolster that team. They just got Chris Bassett from the A's, and what I think was a fantastic move. Chris Bassett is low-key a high-quality starter. Again, he's over in Oakland, so he doesn't get as much attention, but he does a great job. More of a finesse guy. He doesn't throw incredibly hard, pitches to soft contact, gets a lot of ground balls. Does a great job. He's going to slot in nicely. He's going to be like the third or fourth best pitcher in that rotation, which is amazing. Yeah. I think he's a quality 2 or 3 in just about any other rotation in baseball. You got Max Scherzer, you got Jacob deGrom, you got Carlos Carrasco, who people kind of forgot about because he's had injury-prone seasons, but Carlos Carrasco is as good as they come. And then you have Chris Bassett, who is also incredibly undervalued.
No, and I think that's been kind of what we've seen so far is a lot of the guys who are signing, obviously the big names still haven't moved yet. Freeman, still a free agent. Correa, still a free agent. Bryant, Story, all of these guys. We thought maybe they were going to have something locked up as soon as the lockout ended, but clearly they're not in a position to sign yet, whether that's they're not getting the security, they're not getting as much money as they thought they were going to get. Who knows, right? But, you've seen teams like my Cardinals, right, going after a couple of relief pitchers, kind of undervalued guys right now, signing them to some lower end contracts. But, hopefully these are some guys that can contribute. And Bassett obviously is a guy that has proven that he's a big league player for sure. And I think he's going to make a real positive impact this year. Yeah. So, hey, real quick, tell me anybody that you are willing to, maybe throw a couple of bones down right now, say, hey, this is where I think Freddie Freeman's going to end up. Anybody that you're kind of leaning one way that might be a hot take that you want to throw at the people right now, Chuck?
So my hot take is that, first off, I do think that Freddie Freeman is just going to end up going to the Dodgers or the Braves. I think that's the two teams he's got narrowed down to. My prediction is that Carlos Correa goes to the Cubs.
You think that's Correa is going to go to the Cubs? You think the Cubs are going to spend that much money after they just kind of blew it up last year?
Yeah, because I think the fans didn't like what Chicago was doing. And I think that the Cubs also realized at the time that the guys they had were getting older. They were in free agent years. They just wanted to recoup some value while they could. Sure. And they have some intriguing pieces. They're not the worst team in the world. They low-key have a decent starting rotation. Kyle Hendricks is pretty good. They got a couple other guys in there that aren't bad at all. Who else am I thinking of? They got Frank Schwindel, who had a breakout year in Chicago as well. Wilson Contreras
had a great season last year too.
Yep. Wilson Contreras is a steady presence behind the plate. They have some guys who can. They got Clint Frazier. My guy Clint Frazier. I love Clint Frazier.
Yeah.
Who's gonna be a nice piece in the outfield for them as long as he can stay healthy. So they have a lot to work with, and I think Carlos Correa would come in and honestly make them like a fringe playoff contender, especially with the expanded playoffs now with the new CBA agreement.
Yeah, for sure. And if there's more spots up for grabs, then hopefully that means there's a lot more competitive teams too, and not as many teams
exactly
tanking for a good draft pick. Well, hey, speaking of the Cubs, I was actually just in Chicago this weekend, and talk around the town is that Anthony Rizzo is going to maybe try to come back to Chicago. What do you think about that? I mean, it's rare that we see a guy get traded away and immediately come back, but I mean, stranger things have happened. You think there's any chance that happens?
I've learned that in baseball you can never rule anything out, Andrew. So I really wouldn't hate it. It's like one of the fun homecoming stories. Anthony Rizzo loves Chicago. He spent his entire career there before that trade to the Yankees, and they have I guess you could say they have a hole at first base, and with the opening of the DH. Frank Schwindel is not the greatest defensive first baseman in the world, so I think designated hitter would be a better spot for him. Anthony Rizzo is still a quality defensive first baseman. If he's not the Gold Glove caliber guy he used to be, he could come back in. I think he would fit in quite nicely with the Cubs. A bit of a veteran presence for a team that's trending in a younger direction.
For sure. Well, hey, since we've been talking about the DH, it might be a good opportunity to kind of fill some people in on some of the new changes that have come with the MLB lockout ending and the new collective bargaining agreement being signed within the past week. Other than obviously the DH now being adopted by the National League, personally, I'm in favor of it, even as being a former pitcher myself. I think that it's going to be great for the game to get the pitchers out of harm's way in the batter's box, honestly. But what are some other rules that or changes that we've seen with the new CBA agreement, Chuck, that kind of stand out to you, or anything that might be a surprise to you other than the DH and like we talked about with the expanded playoffs?
So here's a big one. It's not going to implement this year, but in 2023, the shift is being banned. This is huge because over the last decade, we've seen a gradual shift essentially in the way that teams have planned their defenses around hitters, where they're gradually doing more radical things to try to prevent, opponents from getting hits. Left-handed heavy pull guys, you saw this with the Yankees a lot. Joey Gallo, teams would consistently heavily shift against Joey Gallo to the point where you had a middle infielder essentially playing shallow right field. I remember watching a Padres game this year where Manny Machado was basically playing right field because of the shift, and he actually caught a ball on the right field warning track. And I'm thinking to myself, I think that's a little too much. I absolutely understand wanting to shift, but I think an extreme shift is, I don't know, it kind of takes away from the game a little bit. I think it makes it a little less enjoyable. People want to see hits, they want to see home runs, they want to see cool offensive things happen.
Right.
Now, I'm all in favor for the occasional pitching duel, but people want to see home runs. They want to see, extra base hits, exciting stuff. So I get you could say I'm a partial fan of it because I do understand defensive strategy is important, so you shouldn't completely get rid of the shift. But I think removing some of the more radical parts of it could be a good thing.
No, I agree with you. I think that there's definitely going to be some positive and negative aspects to it too. I mean, I'm sure that there are going to be plenty of times where a pitcher is going to throw a pitch, it's going to get put in play, and he's going to be expecting a guy to be there because of the shift, and they're not going to be there because nobody's switched on defense. It's not going to be legal anymore. So, like you said, Joey Gallo, there's a ton of guys that this is going to affect, and a lot of them are more left-handed hitters than right-handed hitters. But, it's definitely going to be interesting to see if there is any big change. Our batting average is going to go up. Are there going to be more runs scored as a result of this? Or, is it going to just kind of stay consistently with where it's been at with the shift being legal? So We'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah. So free agency is, we haven't seen too many big names come off the board, like you said earlier. Do you think that they're just waiting for like that one guy to, make the move and essentially all the other dominoes are going to fall? Or is it just because it's a slow market? Because we've seen in the past, free agents take a while to sign in baseball. It's not like football where you see things happen immediately.
Right. I think honestly, one of the biggest factors that's going into this is now that we are in a new CBA, someone's going to have to set the market. You know what I mean? Someone's going to have to set the market with the first big contract. So, yeah, I think that some of the guys are holding out to see what's going to happen so that, if Freddy Freeman signs for $30 million a year, that's going to set the market for guys like Correa or guys like Chris Bryant or Trevor Story that feel like they deserve the same, if not, pretty dang close to it. So, yeah, I think that's probably one of the biggest things. But, no, I mean, the clubs are going to be willing to spend. We know that. There's definitely teams with some big payrolls this year. So if offers aren't being made right now, which I'd be shocked, they've got to be getting floated out at the least. They're probably just not big enough for anyone to bite on.
Right. I think that makes sense. So my gut feeling is that Freddie Freeman is going to be the first domino to fall because the indications seem to be that he has narrowed down his list to at least 2 or 3 teams, if not even less than that. And that his market's kind of misshaping. It seems like it's going to be the Dodgers. It's going to be back to the Braves. The Yankees have been rumored to have some interest in Freeman as well, and he could be debating between them as well. So I think that once Freddie Freeman finally makes that decision to sign, the floodgates might open up a little bit. Some of the other first basemen, I think, will make their decisions. We'll probably see Anthony Rizzo sign somewhere once Freeman makes a decision. We might see a Matt Olson trade on that note as well because he seems to be the big name on the block for trades for position players. And then we'll see guys like Carlos Correa make their moves as well as to where they want to go. It's just all about that one big name, and then the rest will follow.
Yeah, well, it's definitely going to be dominoes. And, you and I were talking about it before we jumped on here. We're hoping it happens sooner rather than later because, man, we're just getting antsy here waiting for some big name guy to go somewhere. The Sonny Gray deal was probably the biggest news of the weekend for sure. So hopefully we get some more exciting stories here over the next week. So, hey, Chuck, real quick, just wanted to remind everybody that we are presented by SportsTimeHQ. We're going to be live on YouTube, on Twitter, and on Facebook every Sunday night at around 8:30 p.m. We might be breaking some live stuff here over the course of the offseason if we get some big breaking news stories that develop. But Chuck and I are going to be your go-to guys for fantasy baseball news, for actual MLB news throughout the course of the season. We're really excited to be getting a chance to talk with you guys and hopefully help you guys win some fantasy baseball leagues this year or make some money on MLB bets. So, Chuck, why don't you tell the people a little bit about you before we switch over to some fantasy baseball stuff? Tell us, where you're from, where you're at currently, and when you got into fantasy baseball for the first time.
It's a great idea. So I recently just graduated from Franklin Pierce University, which is in the boonies of New Hampshire. With a degree in political science, actually. So not the typical aspect you'd expect from a baseball podcaster. But no, right now I'm just my work is mainly just involved in fantasy and just various sports. I help run a football podcast over for another group for just long-term football outlooks and stuff like that. And I've been playing fantasy baseball for 9 years now, actually. It's mostly because I have a group of guys that we play baseball together since we were 8 years old, and we're all in a league together, and it's been going 9 years strong. So that's really where
awesome.
I got my firsthand knowledge of fantasy baseball. And it's kind of helped catapult me to where I am today.
Yeah, well, that's awesome, man. I've been playing for probably about the same time too. I remember getting into fantasy baseball back when I was younger and really enjoying it. And big fantasy football person here myself. I know that that's a shared hobby of ours as well. And if you play fantasy baseball, you probably play fantasy football. So, hopefully we've got some people in the audience that are enjoying both. Myself, though, I played baseball in college for 4 years. I coached coached in college for a couple of years. I'm a high school baseball coach in the Indiana area myself, and have been following baseball my whole life. Diehard Cardinals fan. So Chuck and I think, are two good minds to help you navigate some of the fantasy baseball landscape, which we all know can get pretty muddy, especially with how many guys there are to choose from. Whether you're in a shallow league, a deep league, we're going to be able to give you some hard-hitting analysis and give you some good targets to go after, both in the draft and in free agency once the season rolls around. So, Chuck, speaking of the season, man, I know that we had a couple of weekends or a couple of series that got delayed. Do you think we're still going to get in a full 162, or are they going to be cutting the season down to like 155 or something?
So, actually, because they were able to agree to the new CBA, I do remember reading about this. They're planning on having a full 162. I believe what they're doing is they're taking the games that have already been canceled and they're going to sprinkle them into the season as doubleheaders and other times like that. Or like where teams have just like a scheduled off day, they'll put a game in on that slate instead.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. I know that the doubleheaders was kind of an issue last year because weren't they doing 7-inning doubleheaders at times?
Which they actually we should mention that while we're here. There's also a new rule: doubleheaders are back to being 9 innings, no more 7-inning doubleheaders. So I think that's a good thing. More baseball is always a big win for everybody.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, hey, just speaking of games starting up here soon, we're about a month away from action getting rolling,
give or take.
Yeah. Our users, we Chuck and I are big fans of Underdog Fantasy. Underdog is a great best ball platform for fantasy baseball drafts, for fantasy football drafts, as well as daily pick'ems. Once games get rolling, that's going to be a great time for you guys to be trying to make some money off of some of the pick 3, pick 4 guys for over under hits, over under total bases. At SportsTimeHQ, our podcast, again, we're presented by SportsTimeHQ. Underdog will give you a free deposit match up to $100 with the code SportsTimeHQ at checkout. Again, that's Underdog Fantasy. Download it. Go check it out. Free $100. You deposit $100, you get $100 back. Minimum $10 deposit though, but use that code SportsTimeHQ, all one word, on Underdog Fantasy. All right, Chuck, let's jump into some fantasy stuff, will we?
Yes, sir.
So hey, who's like the undisputed, no doubt about it, who's the 101 in fantasy baseball drafts right now?
For me, it's Fernando Tatis. Fernando Tatis is my 101.
I don't think that you can really debate that. And I'm assuming you're not, take a pitcher at the 101 kind of guy.
No, typically not. Unless I'm in a league where there's some type of extra premium for pitching stats, I'm not inclined to spend a premium asset on a pitcher.
I'm with you, man. I mean, pitching is one of those things where you can get a workhorse guy. You can go after, a Garrett Cole. You could go after a Jacob deGrom. You could go after any of these big name starting pitcher guys early just to lock down a spot in your rotation. But at the end of the day, they're only playing once a week, twice a week in your lineup if you're lucky. I think it's better to lock down a guy in the first round that's going to be playing for you almost every single day and that's going to be producing for you almost every single day. So Fernando Tatis in the early first round, it's a guaranteed smash at the 101 this year. If you get a chance to draft a guy like Mike Trout in the middle of the first round, who might come with a little bit of an injury discount, you're probably going to take that too. Anybody that you really like is kind of a dark horse candidate to, hey, if I'm in the late first round for my fantasy draft this year, anybody that you're liking is maybe someone who's being slept on that's a good value, or maybe someone that you're willing to take a shot at early just because you know that they're primed for a big year.
Whew, that's a good one. Because I've lately been thinking about guys I'm trying to fade, so I really haven't been paying too much attention to guys I want to target with high upside.
Well,
But
who's a first round fade then? Who's a clear stay away in the first round right now?
So someone I'm actually staying away from is, believe it or not, Corbin Burns, which I know is kind of an interesting one because he obviously had a ridiculous year for pitchers. That was basically his breakout year where he emerged as the ace of the Milwaukee staff. But I think that was one of those years that's going to be a little difficult to replicate. And
definitely,
let me just say that I think Corbin Burns is a fantastic pitcher and that he's going to be great for fantasy, but I don't think he's going to be first round value. I think he's a guy, by the time the season's out, his value is going to fall more in line with mid-second, maybe even early third round value. So I think that there are other guys who have had more consistent production in the past that you can rely on to give you better value in the first round. Like if you're at the end of the first round and you're dead set on taking a pitcher, take a Garrett Cole if he's there, or take another ace type guy who will be there.
What about a guy like Shohei Ohtani? I mean, obviously what he's doing is incredible, being really one of the first guys who's been as dominant on the mound as he is at the plate, frankly, since Babe Ruth. I mean, we've seen guys like Michael Lorenzen who can do both, but no one's really produced at the level that Ohtani has really ever in recent history. Is he a guy that you're willing to take a shot on in the first round, especially if you could potentially get him at dual eligibility?
See, that's tough for me. So I play the league I play in is long-term dynasty. Ohtani counts for two positions, obviously because he's a starter and he's also outfield / DH. But you can only put him in one spot at a time. Like he can't be in both. So like on days where he's starting, you can't use him for hitting, and on days where he's hitting, he can't be locked in as like a starter. So I feel like that kind of hinders me a little bit. So I'm a little less inclined to maybe take a shot at someone like Shohei Ohtani. Now if your league's different and you can put him where you want, then I'm absolutely going to smash that because he's an incredible two-way player that I think the game has never seen in the modern era, where he can smash 40 home runs in a season. He can steal bases. He's fast. And he can blaze 100-mile-an-hour fastballs by people with seemingly little to no effort. It's incredible. So I would take him if the opportunity was there. It honestly depends on the type of league that you play in because not everyone does the same type of fantasy leagues that we all do.
Yeah, and what's really a shame is that the Angels with Shohei Ohtani, with Mike Trout, with great talent around them, Anthony Rendon being added in the offseason a couple years back, and even having Albert Pujols for so long, they've just never been able to really break through. They've never even made the playoffs for as long as they've had Mike Trout. So if Shohei Ohtani is worth a late first-round pick, hopefully that means that the Angels are going to be competing for a playoff spot towards the end of the season.
One would hope. I think it's a shame, honestly, that the Angels have been, so I guess mediocre, if not outright terrible for so long. Because I think they made the playoffs one time in Mike Trout's career and they got swept in the first round. That's embarrassing. You could argue he's had the title of the best player in baseball for as long as he's been in the league because the stats he's accumulated, the things he's done is just downright impressive. And now that they have a premier two-way player in Shohei Ohtani, these are opportunities that you really can't afford to waste. I feel like I've been saying this year after year after year, but the Angels need pitching. The Angels don't have starting pitching. I don't know what they're going to do with their rotation. They have great hitters. Anthony Rendon. You got Shohei Ohtani. You got Mike Trout. You have other guys that can fill in here and there who do a great job. Jared Walsh, he's a premier power hitter, lefty. He's great. I love him. Justin Upton, he can still provide quality at bats here and there as a veteran presence. But they just don't have anybody who can throw the ball besides Ohtani and Raisel Iglesias in the bullpen. That's it. They don't have anyone else.
Didn't they get – I might be wrong. Didn't they get Noah Syndergaard before the lockout? Isn't he going to be added to the rotation too?
They did. Yeah, 1 year, $21 million. And that's a risky move. But admittedly, that is a move that could pay off because Noah Syndergaard has ace-level stuff when he's healthy. But again, the issue is I feel like we say this with a lot of pitchers is health. And, I mean, that's just the way it is in today's MLB. Players get hurt, and they get hurt a lot. It's a risk. This just happens to be a higher one because of Noah Syndergaard's fragile arm.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we know that he is a beast when he is healthy, and having him and Ohtani as a 1-2 punch should hopefully help them win a lot of games in the majority that those guys are starting. Like you said, they do have the offensive firepower to compete. I think that offense is going to be a fun one to have in fantasy. If you can get a hold of a Shohei Ohtani at value, if you can get a Mike Trout at value, granted, both of these guys are probably going off the board in the first round. So at value might be if you're waiting towards the end of the first round in your drafts, if you can snag a Shohei Ohtani, go ahead and do it because that offense is going to produce. They're going to score a lot of runs. I think that you're going to want to own guys in that lineup. They're going to score runs for you. They're going to drive in runs. They're going to hit home runs. Maybe stay away from the pitching, like you said, though, Chuck, because they have historically not been the most successful pitching team. But offensively, I think these are guys that we're going to want. So you said you were working on some more fades, though. Are there any teams in particular that you're trying to stay away from, or are you just more of a fade guys at certain ADPs? You hate the draft pick as opposed to the player themselves.
Right, yeah. See, I don't – that's my thing. I don't hate players. There are no – even Red Sox players, I'm a Yankees fan. I have intense dislike for players, but – I respect their game. And if there's a guy like last year, I got Rafael Devers at a bargain and he boomed and he was amazing, but there are guys that's just, I feel like their draft position doesn't reflect what they'd actually put out on the field. And a guy I think that exemplifies that for me this year is Austin Riley. I cashed in on Austin Riley last year. I got him off of free agency because we didn't know what he was going to do coming into the season. And he put together a remarkable season, smashing over 30 home runs. He had 300 and that was great. But I think he was also helped by some really good positive regression for like BABIP and stuff like that, where the numbers might not accurately reflect what he actually did. And so I think he might be due for a little more regression. Like he had an extremely low strikeout percentage, which didn't reflect what he was doing at the minor league level and his earlier season struggles. So I think he might have a little bit of a downfall per se, where he might be more like a fourth or a fifth round guy. Because right now his ADP is in the late second, early third, and I don't think that's something I'm willing to commit to. Yeah, and honestly, go
ahead, Chuck. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, and like the third base position overall, I think for me, that's kind of the next topic I wanted to go into actually with you is like, what's a general position in fantasy you think is the weakest? Like, what position for you?
Man, I mean, that's tough. Honestly, I feel like the two weakest positions are guys. Positions that I'm either going to stay away from until I have to take somebody, or I'm going to only go after one of the top guys if there's a good value on. Third base is one of them.
Yep.
But I think catcher is also pretty tough this year.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's a lot of guys where the names pop out at you, but remember in fantasy, we don't really get points for a guy being a really good defensive catcher. And a lot of teams with, how catching is shifted, you have to be really solid defensively in order to catch. I think catcher is going to be tough this year because outside of a guy like, someone who's going to have Salvador Perez type pop and potentially hit you 30 home runs, there's not just a ton of guys that pop out at you as someone that's a good value this year.
Yep. I was going to say third base was definitely one for me because if I can't get Jose Ramirez like in the top 10, I'm probably not going to reach like for Austin Riley, for some, or Adalberto Mondesi for some reason that has an incredibly high ADP. He's getting drafted in like the 5th and 6th round. And I just don't see it. He's got speed. He'll get you some stolen bases, but he's a good defender. It's the same thing. You don't get points for defense. He's not going to provide you too much else in any other statistical category besides maybe triples.
No, I would agree. And, same thing with guys like Matt Chapman. Matt Chapman is a name that's super recognizable among baseball fans. He's a 220 hitter. I mean, he's going to hit home runs, sure. But, if you're in a league where you lose points for strikeouts, drafting some of these third basemen that are going early, it's just not a very sound strategy. And for me being a Cardinals fan, I love Nolan Arenado, but I'm not confident that Nolan Arenado is worthy of being one of the first 2 or 3 third basemen off the board this year, just purely because I don't know if he's going to be worth that price tag the whole season long. You know what I mean?
Right.
So like Chuck, I mean, we're guys that, we'll even recognize as big of a fan as you are of the Yankees and me of the Cardinals, we'll recognize sometimes when you're not getting the return on investment for even some of the hometown players.
Exactly. I tend to agree. And actually, the Yankees just made a not a big one, but a minor free agent signing. They just signed
breaking news on the podcast. Give it to us, Chuck.
I don't know about breaking news, but I don't know if it's a name you're familiar with. But the Yankees signed Ronald Guzman to a minor league contract.
Okay.
He was a former Rangers top prospect, first baseman, lefty guy with a bit of pop. It's funny, he's actually a Yankee killer. I remember watching multiple Yankee series against the Rangers, and Ronald Guzman had 2-3 home run games.
Damn. Yeah, well, he's definitely going to have some pop. Do you think that he's going to be like on the big league roster day one, or do you think that they are going to just let him kind of marinate in AAA for a little bit and see how he does?
Yeah, I think he's going to be in AAA probably. Because he's just not a guy I think is that important enough to come up and play at a productive level, because if he was a formerly a top prospect, so that gives him some value, but he's not what the Yankees are looking for right now. It's fine to take a little bit of a shot like that, but you want someone who can provide you consistent production, which is why the Yankees are shopping in the upper tier of the first base market. So it's fine for depth, but not for much else.
Yeah. Hey, one move that we didn't talk about earlier, and let me know if this has any fantasy impacts for you, but Clayton Kershaw is staying with the Dodgers on a 1-year deal. Where do you think he should go in fantasy drafts, knowing that he's coming back to LA?
So having the protection of an absolutely dominant Dodgers lineup does every Dodgers starter a huge boost for fantasy, for wins if nothing else. We saw how good Julio Urias was for fantasy last year. He led the majors in wins. He had 20 wins. That value was incredible, because in a lot of leagues you get 5+ points for just getting a win. So Kershaw for wins alone is nice. He's getting a little older, so if you're playing long term, that's something to keep an eye on. But if you're just playing redraft, I think he's somebody you could probably grab moderately early. Do you have his ADP pulled up right now, actually, for value, perchance?
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. Let me see here. I just had him a second ago. Well, I know one thing with Kershaw is you know exactly what you're going to get with him. He's super consistent, and if he stays healthy, he's definitely a top 3 guy in the rotation for the Dodgers, and frankly, he would probably be a 1 or 2 in most pitching rotations in baseball. So right now, he is, according to Fantasy Pros, he's the 38th starting pitcher going off the board in fantasy drafts. I don't know if that can't be right, because I feel like that might be a little bit too late. And if that's the case, I might be taking him even a little bit earlier than 38th, just because I know exactly what I'm doing.
If he's the 38th ranked starting pitcher, that's good value. That's a steal.
Yeah.
Because we know Clayton Kershaw provides ace level value when he's on the diamond. And if you're getting him that late as the 38th starting pitcher, I mean, that's incredible. Because you can get him in the middle rounds.
Let's break this down. I mean, he's 34 right now. Last year he started 22 games. He was 10-8. So if you're in a league that, getting a win is a big time point bump, he didn't help you out a ton there, but he had a 3.55 ERA and he only had a 1.02 WHIP. I mean, those are all-star quality statistics right there. And he struck out batters almost 30% of their at-bats. So I mean, he's going to get you fantasy points. He's going to produce. He's not going to have blow-up games either, which I think is really important. Sometimes you go to stream a pitcher midweek because you want to get an extra start, try to get some extra points, and they throw 2 innings and they give up 7 runs, and all of a sudden you're looking straight at like a -10 or a -15 or something.
Oh, the amount of times that's happened to me. Oh, I know the pain. It's tough, but yeah.
I mean, you're not going to get that with Kershaw. And if you can get him, in like the 7th or the 8th round, I mean, you could probably even get him later than that. You might be able to get him in the 9th or the 10th round, but he is a tremendous screaming value right now in fantasy drafts. So if you're drafting early, I mean, modified spring training is about to start here in the next few days. If you're drafting right now, Clayton Kershaw should for sure be on your target list as one of your starting pitchers.
Without question. Another interesting tidbit: if he didn't go to the Dodgers, he said Kershaw himself said he was going to go to the Rangers because it was a choice between those 2 teams, and I think that his fantasy value may have taken a dip if he ended up in Texas.
I agree with you. It's definitely not a great place to pitch, just because we know that you put the ball up in the air in Arlington, it's going to fly with the jet streams, but there is an impact that goes into guys changing teams, and I'm glad that you mentioned it. some of these guys that are free agents that are going to be switching teams, potentially changing jerseys in, that could have a negative impact on their fantasy value, but it also could have a big positive impact on their fantasy value. So, Chuck, are you buying any of the narrative right now in fantasy drafts that people are saying that they want to stay away from a guy like Trevor Story or Carlos Correa because they're not 100% sure where they're going to end up? Or do you think that's kind of BS and you're going to just hit the draft button when you can get a good value on them anyways, even if you don't know where they're going to play yet?
It's all about value for me. Because if you can get a guy who's, fallen a little bit than where you thought he would go, you take him. It's simple as that. I got Carlos Correa 2 rounds later than I thought he would fall in a slow draft I'm doing because the guys I'm drafting with were concerned about where he might end up if it might hurt his fantasy value. But I know what Carlos Correa brings to the table. He hits for good average. He has some pop. He gets extra base hits. He does a bit of everything, which is good. Stat sheet stuffer. That's fine by me. I will take that every day of the week. And I don't know why you would pass up on that. Same thing with Trevor Story. People say with Trevor Story, he's going to be away from Colorado. He's not going to be as good. He's not going to be boosted by the Denver air, yada, yada, yada. But Trevor Story is athletic. Trevor Story's fast. He gets stolen bases. He can get extra base hits. He's got pop. Like if Trevor Story ended up in New York on the Yankees, that right field porch is going to be great for him because Trevor Story has some very nice opposite field power, which he routinely displayed in his time with the Rockies.
Yeah.
And even if he goes somewhere else, Trevor Story has pop. He can bring that anywhere with him. You know what you're getting with the player. I don't think the destination should have as much of an impact as long as you're getting good value.
I agree. No, I agree with you 100%. And right now, we were talking about Correa a second ago. Right now, Correa's ADP is at 79. So you can almost get him in like the back end of the 6th round at this point. That's a guy who, when he gets his landing spot, regardless of where it is, his ADP is going to move up. Like it just is. So if you can get him now, then that's a guy that I'm going to pounce on pretty much any time. Trevor Story's ADP, it's at 41 right now. So he's going a couple rounds earlier. So if you can't get Story at a good value, then Correa might even be a guy just to target at that next position at shortstop.
See, that's my thinking. I think I would rather have Carlos Correa than Trevor Story, and that's just me. So? And that doesn't count defense because obviously we know defense is whatever it's worthless basically. The value's better. Like I got him in the 9th round, Carlos Correa in the 9th round. Which is amazing. And I think he can do a little bit more of everything. He's not as fast as Trevor Story, so I'll grant that that's an area where you might rather have Story, but I think Correa can do a little bit of everything else. I guess just a personal preference for me. I like his game, and I think that I can wait to get a player that I feel is better in Correa than trying to reach early for a guy like Trevor Story.
I agree with you. I think the theme so far, if you've been following along with us, is don't hate players, don't reach, and if you get a good value on someone, take the value. If you get Carlos Correa in the 9th round, take that every single time. We've got Fernando here on YouTube commenting. He's going to draft Story for sure. So, Chuck, it sounds like you talked at least one person into to Trevor Story. Even if Correa might be your favorite there, Fernando, if you can't get Story, maybe go for Carlos Correa. Chuck, anybody who you're a big truther for right now, like who's somebody that you're expecting to have a breakout year, someone that you're not going to leave a fantasy draft without, whether it's a late round flyer or whether that's somebody early on in drafts that you're just real confident about?
So one I'm targeting because I think he's going to get the call up and start this year, Adley Rutschman in Baltimore.
Yes.
The superstar prospect, the number 1 prospect in all of baseball now that Wander Franco has graduated to the big leagues. Adley Rutschman has multiple 10-time All-Star written all over him. Switch hitter, has pop, great contact skills. He's a guy who I can see hitting 300 with 30 home runs like right off the bat. Yeah. He's incredible. And he's going to have that starting catcher position in Baltimore locked down. And he's not a guy that's going to go too early because, again, he plays for Baltimore. The Orioles fantasy players, you typically kind of really don't go for those, too often. Except for maybe guys like Ryan Mountcastle who can give you a little value here and there, but that's beside the point. He's a rising prospect, but in redraft leagues, you're going to be taking more proven guys. So he's a guy that's going to slip towards the later rounds. You can get him in the teens, maybe even the 20s, depending on your style of draft. And I think that's something I would smash every day of the week.
No, I agree with you there. I think that he's going to be in for a good season. And is he somebody, Chuck, that let's say that we get to the middle of May and Adley Rutschman maybe got drafted by someone else in your league because they've heard about him, and let's say they drop him because he hasn't gotten called up yet, are you immediately running to the waiver wire, picking him up and stashing him on your bench, or are you going to kind of wait and see if the season progresses? Is he worth holding on to for that long, do you think?
Absolutely, because he will play in 2022. The Orioles have no reason to let him stew in the minors because they're a team that's young. They know they're not going to win in a ridiculously talented American League East, so they want to see what their kids have. So Adley Rutschman, even if it's not right away, he will see the field for a majority of 2022 with the big league club. So he's a guy. If he gets dropped, I'm going to put him on my roster without question. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I hope so too, and that brings up a good point, Chuck. Both Chuck and I are also helping out SportsTimeHQ with writing some blogs. I did a preview on the American League East Division a few weeks back, and I hoped in my blog that the Orioles were going to bring Adley Rutschman and a few other young guys up and let them progress and see how they do. And Chuck, I believe you're putting some content out as well yourself on SportsTimeHQ.
Yep, that's correct. I'm currently working on a MLB early playoff prediction piece that I'm hoping to have in the next couple days, where I kind of take a look at, I think, what teams have an early edge in making the playoffs next year as free agency slowly moves along in this offseason. So it's going to be interesting to look at. I still got some tough decisions to make because I think some of the wild card teams are going to be tough.
Yeah. Well, we know that the Yankees are going to make the playoffs in your blog, right?
Not necessarily. That's one of the ones I'm debating. I'm not going to lie to you.
Ooh,
so,
okay.
But that you know. So you just wrote an American League East preview, like that's a talented division where any one of those four teams, I personally am of the belief, could conceivably come out and win that division. I think there's going to be two wildcard teams out of the AL East, but I can't commit to the Yankees being one of them because they haven't done anything to improve that roster. Right now, on paper, I think the Blue Jays are the best team in that division, so I think they win the division. After that, the Rays always find a way to make the most of what they have, even if it seems like they don't have anything. So I think they're a wild card team, penciled into my brain. The Red Sox, I think they have an equal lineup to the Yankees, and I think they have some better pitching. I'm of that mind. I think Garrett Cole is better than Chris Sale at this stage, but I think the rest of the depth that the Red Sox have is a little better. So I think that gives them a slight edge over the Yankees.
We've got Fernando here saying the Red Sox are going to make it. What do you think about that?
Again, thank you, Fernando. I could easily see that. It wouldn't surprise me. No hate, no bias here. I'm not convinced the Yankees are going to make the playoffs because I haven't seen any willingness from Hal Steinbrenner to spend money to make that team good. And I think that this is the pet peeve of mine. It's the thing with a lot of owners in professional sports, especially for baseball. It's rare to see the Steve Cohns of the world who don't care about the luxury tax and are willing to spend millions and millions of dollars to put a quality product on the field. The Yankees are good enough to win games and to squeak into the playoffs and then lose because that makes Hal Steinbrenner money. And that's what he cares about. He wants to make money and not win.
Chuck, trust me, as a Cardinals fan, we're a small market franchise. All that we want year in and year out is for the front office to spend money. And when they've made moves like getting Paul Goldschmidt and getting Nolan Arenado, it's been great, but we still need that one piece. Every team could use that one extra piece to get us over the hump. And thank the Lord that we still have some quality free agents. Go ahead and give us the hot take. Who's the next guy that's going to sign, and where are they going to go?
It's Freddy Freeman. We were talking about this earlier, Andrew. Freddy Freeman, he seems like the guy that the entire market is waiting on. Excuse me. Because once he signs, everyone else is going to follow because he's going to set the tone for what players get. And as for where he goes, honestly, I think he's going to answer the call and return home to Atlanta because honestly, I feel like if he wanted to, he would have signed with the Dodgers or the Yankees already because they've made very compelling offers from what I understand. But he wants to give Atlanta every opportunity to match because he loves Atlanta. That's his home. That's his family. He just won a World Series with that team. If I was in issues, I wouldn't want to leave. He can get one comfortable contract and spend out the rest of his career with his team.
No, I think so too. And if I'm Freeman, that's what I'm doing. I mean, you've seen guys that have jumped ship and not have a ton of success the first year. There's a ton of pressure that gets put on you when you sign a big contract and go to a new city. The Atlanta fans know that he's worth whatever money they're going to pay him, even if it is, $30+ million a year for him to come back and put the Braves uni on. I would not be shocked if he does return. But Chuck, I am going to disagree with you. I am going to go with the hot take. We kind of teased it earlier. I think the first big free agent signing that's going to come out this week is I'm predicting that Anthony Rizzo is going to go back to the Cubs. I think he's going to sign a 2-year, $50 million deal. He's going to be happy to come back to the Cubs. They might get a little bit of a hometown discount on him. And I think that he's going to slot into their DH spot and play first base every so often for him as well. Let's face it. I mean, Chicago fans love him. He's going to put rears in seats, so to speak. And he's going to help that team, like you said, that's going to have a lot of youth. He's going to give them that one veteran guy that might even make them competitive, because for all we know, the NL Central could be pretty wide open with the Reds and the Pirates seemingly throwing in the towel before the season's even started with some of the moves that they've made or not made so far. So that's my bold prediction. Chuck, any final thoughts? Anything else that we might have missed that you want to kind of go over with the people, or do you feel like we kind of covered all the bases? No pun intended.
I want to do a little game with you if you'll bear with me.
Yeah, I will indulge you. Let's do this.
I want to put a few free agents out there, and I want each of us to just say what team he lands on and why. So okay. we'll do Carlos Correa, we'll do Trevor Story, we'll do Freddy Freeman. I know we talked about him a little bit, but we can go a little more in depth with Freddy Freeman. We'll do Nick Castellanos, who I think is a name that we haven't really talked about, who's very interesting, and we'll do Chris Bryant, because I think those are probably the biggest names on the market. So we'll start with Carlos Correa. Where do you think he goes?
Man, Correa is a tough one. There's a ton of teams that could definitely use his services because he is a great middle infielder, and he also provides some pop at the dish, which is pretty rare to see from a shortstop. And one of the things that is not being considered is Correa is one of the younger guys that's hitting free agency this year. So you can sign him to a big deal and lock him down for a while. You know, a team that's an interesting fit to me is the Nationals. I think the Nationals, they have money to spend. They've got Juan Soto. They could be somewhat competitive in the NL East. We know the Mets are looking to spend money, but how many times have they done that and that's not worked out for them? I mean, the Braves are going to repeat potentially in that division, and you've got the Phillies with Bryce Harper and some other promising pieces, but the Nationals just won the World Series a couple seasons ago. We know they lost Max Scherzer. We know they've lost some other big-name guys in the last couple of years, Trey Turner getting traded to the Dodgers. There's a spot that's open there in that lineup. They probably have the money to spend, and wouldn't that be awesome for Washington to be able to lock down a guy with the talent of Carlos Correa for the next 6+ years?
That's an intriguing fit. Not to be honest, not one I thought of, but I'll play devil's advocate for you on this one. Why do that when you could have just locked down Trey Turner, who I think is a way better player? Because Trey Turner, yeah, I think is around the same age. He gives you way more offensively with his amazing blend of speed and power, and he also plays incredible defense. So I think if the Nationals were kind of willing to commit to being competitive still, they would have not traded Trey Turner in that Max Scherzer deal, and they would have just kept him to pair with Juan Soto for the long term. But again, this is predictions, so who knows?
Yeah. Maybe they look at trading away Trey Turner and now they're regretting that decision. So maybe that's another motivator as to why they might lock down Correa. So what about you, Chuck? Where do you think Correa is going to end up?
Man, there are a lot of teams that could use a player of Carlos Correa's caliber. And I'm honestly going to stick with my my hot take of the Cubs. I said that earlier. I think that Correa could go to the Cubs. And like you said, you think Anthony Rizzo goes back there? I don't think I think the Cubs want to compete in what is going to probably be an open NL Central. The Cardinals are going to be good, but they have a few question marks. We know what the Brewers are providing with their elite pitching staff, but they're hitting at least something to be desired, especially considering they downgraded from Avisail Garcia to Hunter Renfroe, and they didn't really do much else to help that offense, with Christian Yelich seemingly kind of regressing hard.
Yeah.
So I think
that coming, by the way, that was pretty crazy.
That was unexpected.
Yeah. You think Yelich is a prime bounce back candidate for you, or is he a guy that you're going to stay away from?
I don't have him in any of my leagues. I'm just not comfortable with it. That high strikeout rate is brutal.
Yeah. Well, here's hoping that he makes it click from a fantasy perspective, and just as a baseball fan, I love Christian Yelich, but as a Cardinals fan, I'm hoping that the Brewers can prevent, he gets prevented from having another hot season because he absolutely murdered us a few years ago.
Yeah. So we'll go on to the next guy, Trevor Story. I'll go first for this one. I think Story ends up in New York. I think he ends up in New York with the Yankees because I don't think they're going to want to spend the $300+ million it would take to keep a guy like Carlos Correa. And I think that the Yankees would want to go for maybe someone like a slightly better value. And that way they might be willing to spend more on first base to try to find a delicate balance. And Trevor Story would love the short porch at Yankee Stadium. Right-handed hitter with some pop. He's got some speed, which is something the Yankees have been lacking for a while because they got a lot of slow, heavy power guys. So Trevor Story can bring a unique blend of athleticism and power, which is something that I think the Yankees need. That's something they've been said they want to address this offseason. Get more guys who can steal bases, move from first to third on base hits, score from first on a double, things like that. And I think Trevor Story can bring that. And he's a great defender. So that's something they could also use because the Gleyber Torres experiment at shortstop did not work at all.
No, I agree. I think that the Yankees would be an awesome fit for Trevor Story, and I would not be surprised if he goes there. But I'm going to kind of throw a dark horse one out there that might be a little bit of a hot take, and I want to see what your reaction is, Chuck. I think that Trevor Story is going to be a Pittsburgh Pirate. And here's why. I think the Pirates are going to make him a ridiculous offer just so that they can have another big-name player to put fans in seats and probably do nothing else the rest of the offseason. Would you be surprised if the Pirates did a move like that just to get a big-name guy in there?
I can't see it, and I also can't see why Trevor Story would want to go play in Pittsburgh.
If they offer him enough money, he might agree, but no, I think he's too much of a competitor to want to go somewhere else.
I'll tell you this much. Brian Reynolds would like it because the poor guy is just sitting in Pittsburgh with nobody to help him. You know, he would love that.
No, it would be great. It would be interesting for sure, but no, I doubt that happens. I think that the Pirates franchise is just a stay away for pretty much every free agent right now at this point. And if you're a Pirates fan, you're in dark days right now, but hopefully the sunshine is going to be peeking through here soon. There's a couple of promising guys that should be coming up the pipeline here in the next year or two.
Not to put salt in the wound, but the Pirates, they seem to have a lot of bad luck, don't they? There's a lot of good players who used to be on the Pirates who are succeeding at a high level elsewhere.
Yeah,
we saw what they have. Austin Meadows turned into a great player for the Rays. Yeah. When he moved over from Pittsburgh. I'm missing somebody else. I'm gonna feel stupid. And who else did they get in that Chris Archer trade? Because they got Austin Meadows. They got a trade.
I'll look into it right now. But no, I mean you're totally right. I mean at one point in time, and granted we're probably going back almost 10 years ago at this point, but they had Andrew McCutchen, they had Starlin Marte, they had Josh Harrison at the peak of his powers. They had a great rotation. And then it just seemingly all blew up. Jameson Taillon's now with the Yankees. He's somebody I know that you get to watch pitch every fifth day. You know, Starling Marte was a huge guy that got dealt last year at the trade deadline, and he garnered a pretty big contract this year as a free agent. So, no, they're
Tyler Glasnow. That's who it was. Tyler Glasnow.
Yeah, and we all know how Glasnow has turned out. He's one of the probably one of the best looking baseball players in the league, but he's also probably one of the last pitchers that you want to face if you're a big league hitter, just because his stuff is explosive.
Absolutely. You know, I won't draw that anymore. Pirates fans, I'm sorry, but you guys produce some incredible talent. You just got to get them to stick. Don't make any stupid trades. Let's move on to the next free agent. I want to talk about Nick Castellanos. Great cornerback. He's got plenty of pop. He can hit for average. Doesn't play great defense, but with the DH now being in the National League, I think that opens up his market a little bit more. Yep. Andrew, why don't you tell us where you think he's going to end up?
You know, I think that Castellanos is going to stay in the National League, and I think that he's going to go to the Phillies. I could see the Phillies putting in a move for him. He could be a guy that plays an outfield spot for you, but like you said, with the new DH role, he's a guy that would be a pretty good fit for their offense. And if you think about it as a pitcher, if you have to face, you know, a 3-4 of Castellanos Harper or Harper Castellanos, throw Rhys Hoskins into a mix, you know, that's a really scary three guys to have to face back to back to back potentially. They're going to hit a ton of bombs too. I think that Castellanos would be a great fit in Philly, and I think that Philly is going to want to try to get a power bat. and you don't have to commit to him for a huge long-term deal. You might be able to sign him to a 1 or 2 year contract and just kind of let it play out and see how he does. What do you think?
I like that fit. I think Philly could use some bats for sure, but I think he's going to actually go to the American League and play for the Seattle Mariners.
Ooh.
I think the Mariners are a team on the up and up in the American League and the AL West. I feel like the AL West is kind of wide open because the Astros are losing some guys this year, obviously with Correa. The Rangers are getting better, but I don't think they're there yet. And then there's another team.
The Athletics are seemingly in a weird spot too because they're almost they're close to a rebuild.
Yeah, they traded Chris Bassett. They're going to trade Matt Olson. I think they're going to trade Matt Chapman. They're selling. So I think the AL West is up for grabs, and I think that the Mariners could be a team to take that. And Castellanos is a great power bat, which is something I think the Mariners are lacking. Kyle Seager just retired. He was a guy with some pop that I think they're going to miss. And so someone to help fill that would be Castellanos. He can play the corner outfields on occasion. He can DH, and he can even play a little bit of third base as well because he's been known to have some experience playing in the corner infield spots. And if the Mariners think that top prospect Julio Rodriguez isn't going to be ready yet, Castellanos can play some time in left field or right field and do just fine, depending on what goes on with Mitch Haniger. Because they can rotate those guys in the DH and outfield spot on a daily basis.
Definitely. I think Castellanos is a guy that's going to be kind of an under-the-radar guy getting a lot of buzz just because he's going to be a lot more affordable than some of these, bigger name guys, and you won't have to offer him as much of a long-term contract. So he's a fit with a lot of teams, that's for sure, whether that's Seattle, whether that's Philadelphia, or whether that's somewhere else. All right, who we got next? We got Chris Bryant. We got Rizzo still, right? Which one do you want to hammer out first?
Let's do Chris Bryant because he's a guy that I honestly he's kind of forgotten about. Because you have all these everyone's talking about the shortstops and everyone's talking about Freddy Freeman. So Chris Bryant, falls on the radar. But Chris Bryant's still an incredible baseball player who's only 29 years old. He's got several great years of baseball left in him. And, he got traded to the Giants. And, again, not a lot of people always pay attention to the Giants, which is a shame because they should because the Giants are a great baseball team. But, so Chris Bryant was just, in that lineup and he was okay. But Chris Bryant was a superstar with the Cubs, and he put up great numbers with the Cubs. So he's gonna find a home with someone who's gonna, I think, pay him very well. Do you want to take a crack at where you think he goes?
Well, I just said that Castellanos go to Philly, and I wouldn't be surprised if Bryant ended up in Philly, just because we know that he's close friends with Bryce Harper. They both grew up in Las Vegas together, so there might be some backdoor recruiting going on with Bryce Harper, but I'm gonna make a prediction here. I think Bryant's gonna stay with San Francisco. I think San Francisco might make him an offer. He did well for them. It seemed like the fans welcomed him with more than open arms. He almost immediately became a fan favorite, and he did help the Giants reach some success. Now, granted, they were having a great season before he got there. He was just kind of a guy to kind of bolster things down and almost guarantee them a spot in the playoffs, but he was a great fit there when he got traded to San Francisco. I thought that it was an awesome move by the Giants to go and lock down a guy like him. He was productive. He's proven that he's productive. I think that the Giants might make him an offer that he can't turn down to get him to come back. What do you think?
So I think actually that the Padres are going to find a way to get Chris Bryant.
Okay, so you think he stays on the West Coast for sure?
Yes, I do. He likes the West Coast. He's a West Coast guy. He enjoyed his time in San Francisco. I think that the Padres are doing everything they can to get rid of Eric Hosmer's contract because that's kind of an albatross for them right now. Yeah. So that's going to free up a little bit of money. And I think that Chris Bryant's power bat will fit in really well with that lineup with Tatis and Machado. I think it would be an incredible middle of the order right there. Bryant can play first base if as needed, which would fill that hole if Hosmer's gone. He can play third base still, obviously. He can play the corner outfield. So then the Padres really kind of have holes all over the diamond that can be filled by Chris Bryant because he's a super utility, everyday starter who can do a bit of everything. And I think that's something that could be incredibly valuable to any team, but especially the Padres, because I think they want to make that push to get them over the Dodgers and over the Giants in a really competitive National League West.
Yeah, and Chris Bryant would certainly be just another superstar out in San Diego. It's kind of crazy. Like 5 years ago, the Padres were nothing. And then they signed Manny Machado, which was a big shock to everyone. And then the emergence of Fernando Tatis Jr. And now all of a sudden they're attracting guys like Chris Bryant. So we'll see what happens. It's definitely interesting, and I think Bryant's going to be a guy that can garner a lot of money wherever he ends up. And like you said, that versatility that he offers is something that's underrated, but probably is not going to be underrated by an MLB ball club. He's going to definitely get his payday. That's for sure.
Yep. Something I wanted to touch on real quick too. Watch out for the Rays. I know you wouldn't expect it because the Rays don't typically spend a lot of money, but at the trade deadline, they were close to getting Chris Bryant. They had a chance. It didn't end up working out, but if they still really want him and value him, there's a hole at third base. They traded Joey Wendell this offseason. Chris Bryant can slot right in at third base, and he can be a big bopper because Tampa needs a big bopper.
All else staying equal, Chuck, if the Rays sign Chris Bryant, are they the favorites in the East?
No, I still think it would be Toronto.
Ooh, okay. I think Toronto's got a ton of young talent. I mean, we know about Vladdy. We know about Bichette. Kevin Biggio is bound to break out this year, in my opinion, and they've got solid pitching. We'll see what happens. Chris Bryant would be an interesting fit in Tampa. You know, I like Chris Bryant as a player. I know he has talked some smack about St. Louis in the past, so hopefully Tampa Bay would be a fun enough city for him to entertain as a free agent. But we'll see what happens. I wouldn't be shocked if he stays on the West Coast too. All right, you want to wrap it up with Rizzo and then maybe give the fans a hot take for the rest of the week?
Sure. So Anthony Rizzo, he has a few different suitors. I think the first base market is really going to depend on what Freddy Freeman does because especially teams like the Yankees, because the Yankees see Anthony Rizzo as like there's option C. Sorry. Brain freeze right there.
You're good.
Because the Yankees want Matt Olson or Freddie Freeman. Right. And Anthony Rizzo is going to be the guy that they pivot to at the last minute. And Anthony Rizzo liked New York, so he's going to want to wait and see what happens with Matt Olson, where he gets traded and where Freddie Freeman signs before he does anything because I think he wants to come back. He seems to like it. But if he doesn't go to the Yankees, I think that a return, we talked about this earlier, it seems repetitive, but a return to Chicago is not out of the question. Probably get a hometown discount. He still plays quality defense. He's got some pop in that lefty bat of his. The fans would love him. Veteran mentor for that clubhouse. And I think the Cubs can make a few moves this offseason, especially if they get Correa to, kind of propel themselves into more of a contender. Yeah,
no, that would – as a Cardinals fan, I would not like to see Rizzo go to the Cubs. I certainly would not like to see Correa go to the Cubs, but – that would not surprise me if he goes back. I'm going to go with the hot take here, Chuck. I think that Freddie Freeman, in an alternate universe where he doesn't go to Atlanta, I think Freddie Freeman goes to the Dodgers. And Anthony Rizzo is your opening day first baseman in Atlanta sporting a Braves uniform. What do you think? Could you see that happening?
I wouldn't hate that. But I will tell you this. I think that if Freeman goes to the Dodgers, that Matt Olson ends up in Atlanta.
You think that would they have to trade for Olson? Olson's not a free agent, right?
Yeah. Olson's a trade candidate because the A's are basically in a fire sale, and Matt Olson's the most coveted.
It seems like the A's are almost always in a fire sale. They were surprise sellers at the deadline last year. They traded Luzardo and Starlin Marte to the Marlins, which was just it was a huge shock to me. I don't know about you at the time, but. Yeah, it wouldn't be a bad move for them to get Olson, but I think that if they could get a guy like Rizzo, he's a guy that no matter where he goes, he's going to immediately be a fan favorite. And in Atlanta, if you're losing Freddie Freeman, I think replacing a guy with the star power of Rizzo makes a lot of sense. Nothing against Matt Olson, but I wouldn't be shocked if half the people in Atlanta have never even heard of him before. Rizzo's much more of a household name.
Oh, for sure. I don't doubt that at all. Playing in the National League for most of his career, they would get to know him a little more than someone like Matt Olson who's in Oakland.
Definitely. All right, Chuck. Well, we're going to wrap it up here again. Shout out to SportsTimeHQ for hosting our podcast. Again, we're the Home Run Hitters podcast. We're going to be coming to you guys on Sunday nights all through the MLB season, as well as the couple of weeks here that we have left in the off season. Hey, real quick, Fernando on YouTube wants to know about Kyle Schwarber. Do you have a last second, just off the top landing spot for Schwarber, Chuck?
Back to Boston.
I'm gonna go. He goes to the Cardinals. I think the Cardinals make a move on him as a DH because we know he's not going to play in the field.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be shocked. The Cardinals could use another lefty power bat in the lineup. Schwarber's a former Cub. The Cardinals kind of like going after guys that were into the division that had some success. Lance Berkman was a guy that they signed a few years back. Dexter Fowler, who maybe wasn't as good as we thought he was going to be, but, he played for the Cardinals for a couple of years. I wouldn't be surprised if Schwarber ends up in St. Louis.
Yep. Watch out for the Mets, too. They're not done spending.
Oh, well, they'll definitely spend some money, and maybe that's appealing to a guy like Schwarber. So, Chuck, I'm going to hit you with the hot take for the fantasy season. I want you to hit me with the hot take before we jump off of here, okay? My hot take for fantasy 2022 MLB, really it's more of an MLB prediction than a hot take. I think Jack Flaherty for the St. Louis Cardinals, and I'm not saying this just because I'm a homer, I think Jack Flaherty is going to have a top 5 fantasy baseball season this year on the mound.
I like that. I'm a Jack Flaherty guy. I think he's a high-quality starting pitcher who I think gets undervalued a bit because not everyone pays attention to St. Louis. But Jack's a great pitcher.
Here's some facts. He's been unlucky with injury history in the past, but when he's healthy, he's dominant. He's coming into this season 100% healthy. He might not even be the opening day guy because Adam Wainwright was so good last year, so that might take some pressure on him. But Flaherty's in the midst of a contract year. He's got, I believe, one more year of arbitration up, and he wants to get locked down in a long-term deal. I think that's going to motivate him to have a great season on the mound. Even if he doesn't win a ton of games, which, in my opinion, wins are an overrated stat, I think he's going to put up the production between strikeouts and limiting base runners that's going to get you a ton of fantasy points. I think he's a smash in the 5th and 6th rounds if he even falls to you that late.
I like that. That's a good one. So I'll hit you with mine. It's actually kind of in a similar vein. I think that Joey Gallo will be a top 10 fantasy outfielder.
Ooh, I like that. I could see him having a monster offensive year.
This one's hot. I admit it's hot. But it's a contract year for him too. He's going to be a free agent. He's 28. He's going to want to catch it, and probably what's going to be the biggest payday that he's ever going to get. This is one chance at a big contract. And he got hurt a little while after he came over to the Yankees, so he had some struggles. He had a higher than normal strikeout percentage for his career because he struck out at a higher percentage with New York than he ever did with the Rangers. And the one time he started to get hot, he had to sit out for some games because of an injury, and he came back and he wasn't the same. So I think a full offseason, a chance to work with a new hitting coach and a new coaching staff is going to do wonders for him. He might also get some more rest days as a DH. He can rotate in and out because I think they're going to give Stan some more time in the outfield as well. And I think he's going to take way more advantage of that porch in right field. I think he's going to crank 40 home runs. He'll get over 100 RBIs. I think he's going to be incredible value.
Let's go. Well, hey, there's a couple of hot takes. I hope that you've been taking notes. Snag these guys in your fantasy drafts. They're going to be big producers. You heard it from Chuck and myself first. Hey, thanks to all of you guys for tuning in to the Home Run Hitters podcast presented by SportsTimeHQ. And again, one more reminder, download the Underdog Fantasy app so that you can follow Chuck and I as we make some pick'ems throughout the course of the MLB season, help make you guys some money. Use promo code SportsTimeHQ at deposit, and you're going to get $100, up to $100, I should say, in an instant deposit bonus. Chuck, man, it's been a pleasure. This was a lot of fun. I'm excited to continue chopping it up with you. I hope that all of you guys are as well. I think we are out, Chuck. This is at FFChuckV, FF_ChuckV on Twitter. I'm at AQuinnFF on Twitter. Give us a follow. Let us know if you appreciated the show. And again, follow SportsTimeHQ on Twitter. Subscribe on YouTube. Follow on Instagram, Facebook. You know the drill. Chuck, let's get out of here, man.
Yep. Been a pleasure. Thanks for listening, guys.